Yeah, I'm really happy. This is a topic not many people know about, but you might be a highly sensitive person or have a child or teach kids who are. And I'm glad you showed up tonight. When you think of the word sensitive, what do you notice just in your body or what you feel or what you think about that word, sensitive? I know what comes across my brain, but I will talk a little more. So, this is my picture as a kindergartner. I grew up being a really sensitive kid. I more thought there was something kind of wrong with me because I felt so deeply. It wasn't till maybe I was in my 40s that I learned about highly sensitive people. And it really explained a lot. And since then, I've been talking about it. It means a lot to talk because not only those who are highly sensitive, but those who work with people who are highly sensitive, they're often misunderstood. So I grew up in a sports family, which actually in some ways helped me and in some ways hurt me because sports was a great way to deal with anxiety. Highly sensitive kids often deal with a lot of anxiety because they feel so deeply. And ended up getting in sports. And again, for me, that was good and not so good in some ways. My dad was definitely a tenacious man. This is who he was in college. And I think my sensitivity or ability to feel deeply scared him. But it didn't come across as vulnerability from him. It came across as him trying to change me and trying to toughen me up. And the one thing I'll share later is you don't need to toughen up highly sensitive kids. They're tough. It just doesn't come across in the same way. If you're a teacher or a parent, the goal is to support your highly sensitive children in learning to honor who they are and what they need and see the value and strength. It's not something that you're going to change, like you got to make them less sensitive. You just got to help them to understand who they are so they cope with the world that overwhelms them most of the time. Often, highly sensitive children feel like there's something wrong with them because they're different and people want to change them. They're different in a way that they feel deeply, even more deeply than whatever a normal human being is. They just feel more intensely, they sense more intensely, they perceive more intensely, so they get flooded very easily. Elaine Aron, I think is a pronunciation of her name, wrote, she was sort of the person who brought light to this. And her quote is, "One thing all humans were born to do by nature is simply to be aware, fully aware." In that sense, highly sensitive children are superb humans. One out of 15% to 20% of all mammals. So obviously humans are mammals, but there's a lot of other animals that, animals are highly sensitive. So that's a good portion of our population. And again, very little is known about them. They're often seen in schools as like, what's wrong with them? They cry too much. There's often labels put on them. And the one thing I want to often look at in my life is I try to see the gifts in everything. It's one of the things I learned in therapy to try to orient my brain because our brains are going to focus on sort of the things that go wrong or the mistakes we made. That's just how they're wired because that helped us survive. But you have to refocus because many things have a silver lining. And in some ways, maybe you could even argue that they're there to help you. So just for a moment, and again, if you're not sure what highly sensitive means, we'll get to that. But one thought I'd love you to leave with and just roll around your head in the coming weeks is, what is a gift that your highly sensitive child has to offer to you? Because I often felt I was one of 7 kids and had a mom and a dad, and I often felt like a pain in the butt, to be honest. I don't think my sisters would say that. Maybe they would. I think they love me, but I mean, I had a lot of meltdowns as a little boy, a lot of tantrums, and I often felt like I was too much. And I think a lot of highly sensitive kids feel that. And again, how the parent responds is important. Sometimes there are two parents that are highly sensitive. Sometimes there's one parent, if there's a couple that is highly sensitive and the other isn't. And sometimes neither of them are, and they have a child who's highly sensitive. So, in other words, what's your highly sensitive child trying to teach you? Because the moment my teaching changed as a teacher was when I got in therapy at 32. And every year I started looking when I went into my classroom every year is what's the lesson I'm going to learn from my students? What are they going to teach me? And it usually was about somehow self-development in an area and they needed to grow. And one year was on sensitivity. And there was definitely a child in my room who was extremely sensitive. And my therapist was very wise enough to use her because I would tell stories about her in therapy because I grew to dislike who I was. I don't like the word hate, but that was the level I felt, and it's again because the people around me found my sensitivity hard for them. Look at this little girl. She might be sad, she might be sensitive, who knows? But she's definitely in this moment. You can feel her depth of feeling. You can see it in her eyes. And what's the definition of sensitive? It's quick to detect or respond to slight changes or signals or influences of a person or a person's behavior. Whoops, that's misspelled. Having a having or displaying a quick and delicate appreciation of others' feelings. And that's something definitely sensitive people are. They're very aware of other people, too much so. And it's interesting that the word comes from Latin, which is, I don't know how to say this in Latin, resilient, but leaping back. So this idea of resilience, sensitivity. So highly sensitive individuals are those born with the tendency to notice more in their environment and to deeply reflect on everything before acting, as compared to those who notice less and act quickly and impulsively. That's one thing about me is I definitely want to move slowly sometimes because I'm scared and I don't want to make a mistake, which is sometimes a good thing and sometimes I'm too slow in making decisions. It's interesting that the leader of a horse pack is the most sensitive horse. And in our culture, if you're a sensitive leader, sometimes you're seen as weak. I mean, if you show emotion or you're vulnerable, that's a sign of weakness instead of being seen for what it is, which is strength. But in a wild horse herd, the most sensitive horse is the leader. And that's because they're so good at detecting and sensing danger that it makes it wise for them to lead. I want to just talk briefly about this book. If you're a teacher, I definitely pick it up. If you're a parent, it's a great story. And maybe you've already heard about it, but it had its heyday, and maybe in the 90s. Maury was a professor and he was dealing with, I think, ALS. And he had a student who was a famous sports writer who started visiting him on Tuesdays because he saw on Nightline. Nightline used to be a story, I mean, a news story after the news each night. It was very popular. And this interview with Maury, went over 2 nights, was the most popular one ever. And this is a clip from it. But Maury embraced his death, and he really taught this sports writer who showed up to interview him every week was a former student of his at where Maury taught. And how are you? I saw a couple faces. It's nice to see faces here all of a sudden. It just makes me feel a little more connected. Thank you for showing yourself. So, so this man who wrote the book, Mitch Albom, he's written a lot of books, was a student in college of Maury, and he listened to Maury talk every Tuesday and recorded it. And this is a clip again of this interview, and I think I'm showing it to you for several reasons. Well, I won't say too much because I want you to watch the video and without judgment, notice what you're feeling. Just watch it, and there are no wrong feelings. If it makes you uncomfortable, it makes you happy, that's all okay to me. It's just very short. It's 3 minutes long.
You got some reaction.
I sure did.
Tell me about it.
Well, there were lots of letters. This is from a teacher in a small Pennsylvania town called Perkiomen Valley Middle School. And she has 4 girls and 5 boys, 10 to 13 years of age. Each of these kids lost a parent, and she's trying to get them talk about it in a group. And the kids, especially the boys, are having a very hard time talking about it. And this is what I said. Dear Barbara Cott, that's the teacher, I was moved by your letter, this is me writing, and feel that the work you are doing with the children who have lost a parent is very important. I also lost a parent at an early age. I lost my mother, and you see, I still can cry about her, at age 8. And it's quite a blow to me. I wish I had had a group like yours where I would have been able to talk about my sorrows and share, even though it might have been hard to talk about my feelings. I would have joined your group because I was so lonely. Right now, I find I can't do it alone either. But I have my friends around me to keep me talk, to help me talk about my illness. I send each of you and all of you as a group my warm thoughts and hope for your continued work together to help each other. As I talk with my friends, I will think of you talking with yours. Warmly, Maury.
Maury, that was 70 years ago that your mother died. And it still chokes you up. You are so brave and cheerful about your own condition now. And I just wonder why it is that something that happened so long ago is so much more painful to you.
Ted, that has nothing to do with bravery. All it has to do with feeling. I don't feel any less powerful just because I've cried about my mother's death. As a matter of fact, tears, for me, strengthen me. They don't weaken me. When I cry about a lot of things all at once, and it includes my own demise. And sometimes, believe it or not, I cry for the pain of the world.
First of all, I want to apologize. I'm embarrassed. I realized my sound was off. I pulled up a clip and didn't want you to hear the sound, and so if I was talking to someone who was speaking, please, I apologize. I didn't hear until I just noticed that. So yeah, Maury, I encourage you to read the book, but he just embraces the life and death. What are the characteristics of being highly sensitive? And maybe again, you are, and not just your child. You startle easily. Complains about scratchy clothing, seams in socks, or labels against his or her skin. Is very sensitive to pain. Is bothered by noisy places. Prefers quiet play. Seems to read my mind. Feels very deeply. Is hard to get to sleep after an exciting day. Doesn't do well with big changes. Prefers a few select friends. Worries about a wide range of things. Maybe physically awkward or tense. Complains of stomach aches or headaches during times of stress. Notice subtleties, something that's been moved, a change in a person's appearance. Tends to play it safe. Is often surprisingly insightful and wise. Seems to lack confidence. Dislikes staying away from home. Is affected by other children's distress. One thing I want to say about sensitivity, I know for me it's a loaded word. It's not a word that has a bunch of good feelings about it. Usually if you call it sensitive, it's loaded with judgment. But sensitivity is a form of intelligence. Here's the 8 ways to be smart. And this is one of the things I taught when I was a teacher for 21 years. I'm now a social worker and licensed social worker. Was I taught that there's 8 ways to be smart. Not that I taught this, but this is what's Howard Gardner of Harvard taught this, and it's very true. And if you look at the 8 ways, there's reading and writing. I wasn't a good reader and writer as a child, and I often felt like the only reason I did well was because I studied hard. But math and logic, those are the big ones that determine IQ. But there's so much more. There's musical talent, there's visual artistic, there's movement, there's intrapersonal. Whoops, that's the wrong one. I put highly sensitive on the wrong one. But interpersonal is your ability to get along with others, make friends, work through conflicts. Intrapersonal, those are the ones who can self-reflect and look inward and are very keenly aware of their goals and what's going on inside them. That's more highly sensitive. But kids can be highly sensitive in visual, artistic, musical. I mean, I played sports, movement, and I was highly sensitive. So it can fall in any of these intelligence, naturalists. Those are the 8 ways to be smart. And again, I'd love to see this emphasized in schools, because there's a group of kids who walk around feeling like they're not smart, and they are. What are your fears? If you have a highly sensitive child, or you have a child who feels deeply, what are your fears about your highly sensitive child, just for a moment, to self-reflect? What scares you about them, that they're that way? And I can't see the chat, but maybe I'll stop at some point. We can dialogue because we have such a small group, or at least take questions. But I know my dad. I don't know. My dad died when I was 13, so I can't speak for him. I wish I could interview him or talk to him. My sense is that I think he was taught as a kid to not feel. I mean, that's just was common in those days for men and women. And I think when I started feeling deep emotion, it made him uncomfortable. I mean, he didn't want to feel his own emotions. So that was part of it. And I think somehow he had a belief that if you cry, you're weak and you're not going to survive, which is, again, the far from the truth. What are the gifts of a highly sensitive child if you have one? Because they're not easy, by the way, to have. I wouldn't say they're easy to parent. The gifts of a highly sensitive child are they're empathetic. They have big hearts. They're smart. But that's kind of a loaded word, as I just said, because there's 8 ways to be smart. Everyone's smart in some way. Intuitive means they know things without knowing how they know it. Creative, they're careful, extremely careful. They're conscientious to a fault. They're very reflective. They think a lot. They think too much. They're caring and loving, and they're strong. They have a lot of meltdowns, though. The brain, I want to go over a little bit about the brain. If you've been in other sessions, we've gone over it, but it's important. It's an area that schools could improve on, because there's very little information really that I've learned over the last 20 years about the brain that I see often in schools. And it's too bad, because if you watch athletes in professions, the professional ranks, they're tapping into neuroscience to improve performance. And this is the cutting edge of the future. But if your 2 lower levels of your brain is what probably cause you the most distress, or the distress on the news, those are our more primitive parts of the brain. They're really important to us. Survival. The brainstem has to do with physical survival, and the limbic system to feeling, emotions. So they're really important. The problem with it, if you don't develop the frontal cortex right behind the eyes, that's where you stop and self-reflect about your emotions and your sensations. If you don't develop that in kids and adolescents, they're going to make a lot of poor decisions when they get older. And so how do these parts of the brain speak to us? Because I'll tie this back to highly sensitive kids. The limbic system talks to you through emotions and memories. So that part of your brain's always talking to you. Whether you pay attention to it or not is the key. And it's just information. Emotions are just helping you make wiser decisions. I know they're uncomfortable to feel, or they can be. Brainstem is sensations, physical sensations in your body. That's the language there. So put them together. I'll come back to this a little while later of things you can do at home, but those two languages are really important. Um, this is where we often go as parents. And I have to admit, the left side of your brain is really more logical than the right side. But the cortex is where we think. That's the top layer. And the lower layers are where we sense and feel. And we often talk to kids who are having meltdowns logically. And they're down in their brainstem and limbic system, and we're trying to get them up to the cortex, and it just doesn't work. They're down here. And highly sensitive kids often have a very sensitive amygdala. Amygdala is your smoke alarm right there. All acts of violence start with the amygdala. It's kind of your signal like, hey, I'm threatened and I'm going to attack, or I'm going to run, or I'm going to freeze. And often kids who have been through trauma have a very sensitized amygdala. It goes off with any sense of threat. And highly sensitive kids often go through trauma. Not always, but they can, and their amygdalas can be oversensitized. Just to show you a real one, because often people will say, I'm not touchy-feely, Tom, and I'll show them that we're all touchy-feely. We've learned not to be, which is a liability in our society. The nervous system is so key, and I want to just show you, it looks simplistic, but it's really important to feeling overwhelmed, underwhelmed, or just perfect. This is your nervous system right here. And again, it has so much to do with mental health disorders. And what I want you to think about for a kid who's highly sensitive, think about those as wires, those nerves as wires, and think of the brain as your circuit box in your house. We constantly are having energy come in. We have emotions all day long that are flowing through our body. We have sensations. And then we now have an added force. We have microwaves. We have a ton of energy around us. We live in a technological society filled with energy. So, and the speed of life. Imagine your home, which has 120 volts running through it. A normal home does. If you try to put an appliance like an electric oven in a home that pulls a bunch of wattage, you gotta up your fuse box to handle 220 volts. Well, kids who are highly sensitive have the amount of energy running through the body of 200 volts, but they have a brain that can handle 120 volts. So, in a fuse box, it short circuits. Well, that's what kids do in the form of acting out or meltdowns. They just can't handle the energy going through their body. And especially where they're at in brain development. Someday they might be able to. And our society looks like this. The sympathetic nervous system is action and work, and it fires the body up. The fight or flight or freeze response, the amygdala, that little pink almond-shaped structure, starts it. Stress hormones, and it's action and work again. It's good. We need it, the sympathetic, but we live on this side. The parasympathetic, which is rest and recovery, slowing the body down, relaxation, safety, digestion, vagus nerve, is the parasympathetic. Ideally, you balance these two. And in school, taking breaks, mindful breaks or movement breaks, things that balance the nervous system. So we're not just in work, which is our society, because that's why so many people burn out. So many people have nervous system disorders, which shows up as depression or ADHD. So imagine this container is your body or your child's body. So it's part of being human. Both our brain stems are working right now, and they're going to be dumping sensations in through your eyes, through your ears, through your senses. You're going to be dumping your limbic system emotions in. And if you're doing something to get rid of those, like breathing or moving your hands, or you get up and walk around, or you take some deep breaths, or you think, then you're not going to overflow. The moment, if you imagine it filling up with sensations and emotions, the moment it fills up, that's when a child acts out or goes away, unless we do some movement or do some breathing or help them learn to self-regulate. So the nervous system gets overwhelmed in highly sensitive kids all the time. And it's not because they're weak, they're just feeling so much. It's like imagine that their spigot is pouring sensations and emotions in at a rate that's it's overflowing fast. They just can't handle it. And so think of a healthy nervous system as going between getting aroused, meaning action, work, sympathetic, and then resting, parasympathetic, settling down, then acting. So we don't live this way. We just live sympathetic, sympathetic, sympathetic. And for highly sensitive kids who feel deeply, they get overwhelmed. And what they usually do down is shut down and go away. That's why they like being with a few friends and they like being home. They find schools overstimulating. It's hard for them to go to large stadiums and things like that where the energy is just too much. Again, this is a really important window to understand your nervous system and just helping kids or yourself learn to deal, try to be in that window of tolerance. That's the ability to feel emotions and sensations and still stay connected to other people. If you can't, and there's too much energy in your body, too much emotional energy or sensation energy, you're going to be hyper aroused. You're going to go to high energy, anxiety. You might get angry. You might be overwhelmed. You'll be hyper vigilant, or fight or flight or chaotic. You can also choose the other route. You can shut down as a way to cope with too much energy. You can numb out, you can do something to numb out. Some people older people use alcohol, kids eat sugar, or they space out in front of the TV set. Depression, passive, or you just withdraw, you freeze, or the shame. So trying to work with kids and help them be in that middle range, they need you to help them learn how to feel and hold more, build up their containers so they can hold more. That's really what it's about. And this is what I hope all of us can feel, a healthy nervous system that's carefree. The highly sensitive kids have faster reflexes because they're so worried about being hurt. They're more affected by pain and medications and stimulants. So when you go into a doctor, they're the ones who, when they give medications, it always has a stronger effect on them. And they're more reactive immune systems and more allergies. So, again, it can help. For me in sports, my faster reflexes were a gift. It helped me. Dealing with easily being overwhelmed, and maybe I live in this world, so it's hard. Little kids complain a lot when they're overstimulated. They often play alone. They watch a lot. They watches quietly from the sidelines, stays in one spot outside or in one room. They sort of observe a lot before they jump in. They can have tantrum or rages more often. Tries to be perfectly obedient. They're so attuned to their parents that they so want to please their parents and do everything well. Part of it is because they hate or they dislike being criticized, and they feel so deeply that any criticism from parents feels like ouch. So they try to do everything really well to the point where they're perfectionistic. They stay on the computer or read all day as a way to tune out the world. That's as a way to buffer the sensations. Sometimes they bounce off the wall, and these are the kids who can get diagnosed as, ADHD. They get, as I mentioned, get stomach ache or headaches, or they overcompensate for what seems like a flaw. They strive to be a star or perfect. I have to say that's part of who I am. There's a good part to that, and there's a downs part of that. You can drive yourself too much. But that selfish sense of feeling deeply comes with shame too. They don't want to feel shame. The entire body is designed to detect and understand more precisely whatever comes in. So they're just tuned into everything. What are the challenges to being a highly sensitive child more than just what I said? These are some more. They're easily overwhelmed. They're easily upset. They have meltdowns. They're shy when overwhelmed. They feel stronger emotions, more intense joy, fear, and sadness. They're very attuned to others' feelings and what's going on inside them. So they can tell you, often they're the kids. They're good to have in classrooms because they're a good barometer of where kids are at, but they can often tell you what other people are feeling. They feel very different and isolated and alone because they feel so deeply. Remember, 1/5 of kids that are highly sensitive, 4/5 aren't. which means a lot of kids stare at them and say, "Why are you feeling so scared? Why are you so crying?" And they don't get it. And as a result, they pull back. They're very attuned to you, meaning the parent or the teacher. They will want to take care of your needs or pain. They'll sense you're in pain or you're dealing with stuff and they want to take care of you. Encouragement for you to do your own, this is encouragement for you to do your own personal growth work, which means getting very aware of what goes on inside you because they're going to pick up on it. How can you support your highly sensitive child? It's probably the most important thing. When we feel understood, really understood, it soothes our fears and our pain and it calms our nervous system. Ultimately, it strengthens us and empowers us. And I know that time and time again when I was a child, it didn't happen all that often because often, back then, not only was I, but other kids, parents kept trying to get them to stop feeling because it was seen as a weakness. But as an adult, when people really stop and listen to me, and I think this is universal for all of us, that when people really try to understand our worlds, it calms us. It almost is the medicine we need. And for highly sensitive kids, it's the same thing. They're so misunderstood a lot that when someone tries to understand them, it's just like so calming to their nervous system. I've shown you this picture before, but it's a powerful one. And it kind of sums up that sense of a parent just being there without an agenda to take away that feeling, just trying to be with that child, and help them feel what they feel, try to understand that feeling. And then eventually maybe help them find a way to calm themselves if they need calming or soothing. The 6 primary emotions I've introduced before are good to try to learn and memorize and stick on your refrigerator. I know Dr. Thomas sent them in previous presentations I did, and I can resend them again. But they're happy and sad, scared and love, and angry and hurt. And they're good to be able to label and name them and be able to become really aware because it's going to help you coach your child or your students in class. We're often taught to not be aware. I know I was, and it wasn't until I got in therapy at 32 that I even started trying to figure out what I was feeling. I didn't even know about feelings, to be honest. I was oblivious. Being with the fear of a young gymnast. So watch how this parent, if you can hear this, hopefully you'll hear it, but this young gymnast is scared going to a gym match. That's not the meet would be the right word. And is listen to how the dad and mom respond.
Exciting day.
Yeah, and I'm nervous.
You don't have to be nervous.
During the 2-hour drive to the competition, Ashley's ankle begins to swell.
This is enough, kiddo.
Ashley, what do good gymnasts do? Suck it up, that's right.
Yeah, but not too much. Honey, you're...
So they missed an opportunity, and that dad meant well, and that mom. But the mom said it's an exciting day, and maybe it was for her, and it probably was for the child. But the child said, "I'm scared," and that was an opportunity to sort of coach them. And often parents, out of the goodness of the heart, say, "Oh, don't be scared." But if we want kids to learn how to feel fear and tolerate it and know how to deal with it, we've got to be able to feel it. And a parent could have said, "Oh, tell me about it. What are you scared? What's scaring you right now?" And kind of go into it. I'm scared like I'm going to mess up. And kind of explore and feel. But that's going to help coach you on, hey, it's okay to be scared. What is her dad said, which is my dad used to say, shake it off. This dad said, suck it up. And again, it means well, but again, to embrace and feel emotion is a strength. When we suck it up and push it down, eventually later in life, sometimes you learn to self-medicate with alcohol or a distraction to get away from feeling. So we want to teach them to feel, if you're not good at it, tell your kids, I just want to start trying to learn how to feel, and I won't be very good at it, but I'm going to try. The challenges or opportunities for being highly sensitive, because there's a lot of gifts that come with them, and there's a lot of challenges. I would, if I was working, when I work with a lot of the kids that I saw in therapy, I don't do as much because I'm working with schools these days a lot and parents, but a lot of highly sensitive kids came in to see me because they're often the ones that feel like something's wrong with them. But if I was a parent working with my child, I'd discuss being highly sensitive with them. Maybe starting in third or fourth grade, when they might be able to understand what that means, what it means and the gifts, the challenges, and how to self-care. Because when they go into overwhelming situations, even a party can be too much for the nervous system. They have to know what to do. Maybe they want to talk to the parent, where they're going to, and just say, hey, can they take a rest up in a different room if the noise gets too loud, or whatever. But they plan ahead if they're going to get overwhelmed, instead of just not showing up for the stimulating event. Get support for yourself in learning about your own fears and pains, and manage them so you don't project them on your child. It allows a child to be a child. This is hard because none of us were coached in how to feel. And often as a parent, it's overwhelming. And if we get triggered a lot as parents or teachers. And we go back to a very old time with old beliefs that aren't good for right now. And the more you can be aware of what triggers you, you can be more present with your child. Because I think I triggered my dad a lot, my mom, and they just didn't know how to respond. And I was a good kid. It's not that I was a pain, but I had meltdowns and I took things seriously. And to them, it was like, oh, for goodness sakes. Get support so you can grow from your child's challenges. I'm a big believer that we're here to grow, and we get coaching in every field, including athletics. But when it comes to mental health, it's like something's wrong with you. And I don't get that. I really don't. And it's slowly changing, thank goodness. And it's starting to see as part of a life, just a healthy life, to get coaching on how your brain works and your nervous system. Get support to empower your highly sensitive child. If that means reaching out to somebody who works, who knows about that, or getting a book on it. But start learning about highly sensitive kids by educating yourself and reading. Talk to their teachers and brainstorm ways to support them. Not as a way, I wouldn't even go in and say my child's sensitive, because a lot of teachers are going to react like, oh my goodness gracious. No, just go in and say, hey, my child really feels deeply, and I'm just wanting to help them so the nervous system doesn't get overwhelmed. Is there ways to maybe take breaks, or because often they're a gift in class, highly sensitive kids, because what often teachers do, including myself, we plunge ahead, forge on, and we never take breaks to relax. And highly sensitive kids are going to tell you when it's too much. So if you use them like a barometer in class, they'll be a gift. Encourage, don't push your child. When they seem to want to do something, encourage them and remind them of past successes. They often don't want to try new things, and it gets frustrating for parents, but you can't push them. You can encourage them. And then if something goes well, remind them. Celebrate successes. If they try a new class and they show up. I'm going to talk about a resiliency journal in a second. Emotion coaching, be a doula. A doula who works with pregnant women to coach them through the pain of birth. It's kind of what you want to be as a parent. You want to kind of coach your children to go through the strong emotions and learn how to deal with them instead of avoid them. Learn how to manage your own emotions so you can attune to their emotion, be a supportive container. So the more you learn to feel or be curious, the more you can start connecting with them in an emotional way. They often push down their anger, healthy anger. Some of them are so sensitive and worried about offending that, having a healthy anger, that they don't even express anger. And that's not good for kids. There's a healthy way to express anger. Praise your efforts, no global comments. Stay away from praising, you're such a kind kid, you're such a sensitive kid, praise like their effort. I'm so thankful that you helped me clear the table. That was very thoughtful. Always praise efforts, not characteristics, because no one's perfect all the time. Plan ahead for success. Anticipate overwhelm. If you're going to overwhelming situations that could cause meltdowns, plan ahead and take breaks or talk to the parent who's chaperoning, whatever the case may be. Because other parents need to understand kids like this, not because they need to be coddled. No. Instead, just like every kid's unique in some way, highly sensitive as ours, and they have things to teach other kids and vice versa. I always see, what can we learn from each other instead of segregate out people? Role play. Discuss self-care options and challenges being with people or intense gatherings. So if they're going to an intense gathering, you might role play with your child. What can you do if this happens? If the music gets too loud, or don't allow a child to be rude. They can be polite and still take care of oneself. Just because a kid's overwhelmed doesn't give them permission to be rude. Read books and talk about characters. Like I'm talking, if you can read out loud to your child, it's such a great way to build social emotional intelligence, but work on feeling when you talk about the character's feelings and paying attention to your own beliefs and attitudes. Support and don't overprotect. Sometimes my mom overprotected me, my dad didn't protect me enough, and they were trying to, I felt like pulled back and forth. Instead of them working together, don't overprotect them. You want to empower them and help them learn who they are and how to take care of themselves, because they will need more help with self-soothing. But you also want them to take on things in life. Practice calming techniques and find your favorite. And I sent some last time. I'll be sending some to Dr. Thomas and she can forward them. But it's really important to find some belly breathing or different ways. Pressure on a body is a great way, where they lie on their side and you put gentle pressure on the body up and down, sort of like with a pillow. You can put pressure on the body. It just calms the nervous system. Set up a calming ritual at the end of the day to slow the nervous system. Have fun, of course. Create joyful, nourishing activities. See your child as strong, powerful, and capable. So I'm going to skip a little bit, because I always come with more than I need, because I never know how much I'm going to use and how much I'll say. But let me see. I do want to show you some of the lines that maybe you heard or you say, because these are connected to feeling and emotion, but sensitivity. Often kids will hear they're too sensitive. Don't be so sensitive. You're too much. Toughen up. Relax. Take it easy. Grow up. Act like a big kid. You're weak. Shake it off. It's not that big a deal. What's wrong with you? Don't take it so seriously. Lighten up. You're a baby. Cry baby. You have to be mentally stronger. I'm not going to have time to show this. I showed it the first night, but you can Google Just Sam. This is a 5-minute clip, but it's so powerful because it shows you the power of connection on the brain and whether you can perform or not. When you're up here and up here, you can perform, but you got to have your needs met down here. And Just Sam calls herself a crybaby. She's a kid who goes out of the subways in New York and sings every day, and yet someone's told her she's a crybaby because she feels deeply, and she starts crying on the show. Don't see her as weak, but she's learned to see herself as weak. And I'm just going to show you this. I want to show you again the times that you model this throughout the day, when you stop and pause in the car and self-reflect out loud and just say, my stomach's really tight. Just feeling a little scared, and I'm just going to take some deep breaths. As you self-reflect out loud, kids naturally self-reflect with you and they'll model you. My dad died when I was 13. This is the gift he left me, which is the lesson learned. He didn't say goodbye. So I came up with this idea that if you could do one thing for your child, this is what I'd do. I would get a cheap notebook, and every day, or maybe every day that something happens, that you write 1 or 2 sentences about your child at the end of the day. It could be an area of SEL, that's social emotional learning, that they displayed. It could be empathy they showed towards someone else, a random act of kindness, facing a fear, calming themselves when they were feeling an intense emotion, working out a conflict with a sibling or someone else, persevering when something is difficult, being honest with you or another person, befriending a child who's lonely, sharing feelings with you, and being a team player. And just write a 1-sentence factual sentence. You faced a fear by going to school today when you were scared of the test. Just write it down, and then give them the notebooks to your children on their birthday. If you really want to make it special, take a recording device like your phone and record it. and then, save it somehow on the computer. So they have your voice reading all the ways that you saw these wonderful SEL, their social emotional learning qualities, and how their sensitivity was a gift. And they can listen whenever they feel down or don't feel okay about themselves. And most of us will live a long life, but one thing I learned from my dad is there are no guarantees on this planet of a long life. And every day you're here is you're lucky. And to live fully. I've been keenly aware that life is very short since I've been young. And it's a good thing. It motivates me constantly to be doing things to try to make this world a better place. And we all have that ability, whether it's with one kid. These 6 ways to calm your nervous system, I set them, and I might escape right here because it might, if there's questions, there's a little more I can share. Well, let me just share this, because reading is something maybe you do with your students or with your children at home. It's a great way to incorporate the body and emotions. So when you're reading, and if you notice, to pause once in a while and just say, hey, let's see what our bodies are saying to us, and see if your stomach's tight or your heart's racing, and then see what you're feeling. If you're happy or sad, you're angry or hurt, you love or feel scared. It's a great way through books. And then to try to, this is going back to try to notice out loud. I also wanted just to have you think about asking this question with your children. Yeah, I got a little more. Let's see. So I'm going to take off screen. There's a little more I can share, but I also want, because it's such a small group tonight, if you have questions that you want to ask, I want to be sure, because this is a subject, I guess I'm lucky in some ways that I've gone through this and I've really educated myself. So if you have questions, I'd love to answer them. I can share a little more to fill out, the last 10 minutes here, but if you want to type, or I can unmute too. I don't know if I have to unmute, but if you want to type a question in, and if you want to raise your hand, I think you can do that. And I'd be happy to unmute you and have you ask your question. That'd be even nicer than typing it. So if you want to raise your hand, I think I'll see a hand here. If not, any questions or comments? I don't see any. Okay, well, I'll share a little more then. I'll stay on afterwards for a minute or two. I mean, in case you're shy and you don't want to ask in front of people or something. Let's see where I want to go. I want to give you an example of what that would look like, because this is a powerful little technique to self-reflect, to speak out loud once in a while, because it's pulling all 3 levels of the brain together. So it might sound like this. We have 10 minutes before school starts. Could be cooking breakfast. I notice my heart's racing. It's your body, just paying attention to your body. You might have to practice this for a while, just start paying attention to your body. We're taught not to be in touch with our bodies. And I'm feeling scared. Again, it might take you some practice to identify feelings, but you will with practice. And I'm going to take some deep breaths, some self-care. I'm going to shake my hands or just walk around the room a little bit. But this idea of reflecting out loud pulls the 3 levels of the brain together. What else? I want to remind you of this, because I was talking about this when we were talking about gaming a few weeks ago. I used to use sugar as my addiction. But, when we talk about connection, thinking about what's healthy and what's unhealthy. Gaming to some point is good, but when we're using it to excess, and I'd rather have you play a game like this with your child, if you're gaming with them or playing some video games, where you tune into your feelings. And I did this with a therapy kid. I had a young boy who came in who was highly sensitive, and every time we were in a session, he'd disassociate, which means he would leave his body, he would space out. The way he coped at home with being overwhelmed is he played on his video game. He lost himself in the video game, which was beautiful, because not beautiful in a way, it was brilliant, because it got him outside the uncomfortable feelings he felt in his body that overwhelmed him. And so what I agreed to was he could bring his video game into therapy with his mom. You're talking about a 9-year-old right now. And we'd watch the video game with him, and I got to call a timeout whenever I'd pause and I'd say, whoa, that guy's about to be killed. I just feel this pressure on my chest and I'm feeling really scared and I just got to take some deep breaths right now. And so I'd self-regulate. And as he played the game, I would pause and go through the 3 levels of the brain. And it helped him start having moments of coming into his body and feeling and then going back into the fantasy of the game. So I'd play, and again, just take moments of self-reflection with your child while you're playing the game, or do this, where you're over their shoulder watching the game. This is what I did in the therapy. We were standing side by side, actually standing up. So, but to stay in touch with those three areas of the brain. I hope this is making sense. And the other thing I want to just say, I know we're winding down. If you can be aware of this when you play, if you play with your children, that children will set you up to feel what they're feeling. What that means is that if you really get good at feeling your body, and this is an opportunity to put down the computer and come play, and not so much with an agenda. It's so fascinating when I do play therapy with kids. I mean, it's brilliant. The kids will set you up to feel their inner worlds through the quality of the play. That if you feel into what are you feeling, like when a kid's racing a car back and forth in front of me, I start feeling like, whoa, that's a lot. I'm just feeling like, wow, my brain's speeding up. So kids will come in and set me up to feel what they're feeling inside. The more I can mirror that back and say, hey, you're racing that car really hard and I'm noticing my chest got tight and I'm feeling scared and I'm going to take some deep breaths. And then you go back to the child and, oh, now you're going over and building those blocks. So the more you can tune into what are you feeling when you play with your child versus getting caught up in they're playing with a car or they're playing with blocks. What's the quality of the feeling in the room? And that takes practice, but it's worth being curious. And I think I might say this last thing to you. Well, I'm sure you have challenges if you have a child, but I want to think about letting go because we carry too much in this world. To let go does not mean to stop caring. It means I'm responsible for my own life. To let go is not to cut myself off. It's a realization I can't control another. To let go is not to enable, but to allow learning from natural consequences. To let go is to trust in the process of growth. Sometimes healing can be challenging and painful. To let go is not to blame others for my issues. It's to make the most of myself. To let go is not to care for, but to care about. To let go is not to fix, but to support. To let go is not to judge myself or others, but to allow ourselves to be human. To let go is not to arrange all the outcomes, but to let things take their natural course. To let go is not to live in fear, but to face reality and take action. To let go is not to deny, but to accept. To let go is not to regret the past, but to cherish each moment of the present. And to let go is to challenge the way I used to live, no matter how risky or how scary or risky it may feel. So we have 2 minutes, and I'll just, if in fact you want more information, there's a book called The Highly Sensitive Child, and there's a bunch on Amazon. And I'll send, I couldn't upload it today because of a problem on Constant Contact, but I will upload it and then send the link to Dr. Thomas in case she can forward it. If you want to contact me, that's my information. My website is bare bones right now. I'm having a brand new website design, but you can sign up for my newsletter or send me an email if in fact you wanted to reach out for any reason. So we have 2 minutes. I just want to wrap up by saying thank you for showing up tonight. I hope that this was useful for yourself. Maybe you're highly sensitive, or understanding your spouse or partner, or understanding your neighbor, or for sure your child. Or as a teacher, if you have a class of 25, 4 of those kids are going to be highly sensitive. Are you doing the math right? No, 5 out of 25 would be highly sensitive. So it's just not talked about a lot, but it's real. And often they get medicated. And often I think they're prone for suicide. I think Robin Williams, the actor, was highly sensitive. That's my hunch. And they often get overwhelmed by the earth and by what they experience and don't know a way out. And that's why it's important to learn about, especially if you have a child, because you can make a huge difference just understanding and being curious. Again, I'm going to stop the share and come back to the screen, and we're wrapping up. But if you want to type in a question or ask a question, I'm here. Again, I thank Dr. Thomas and Lawrence County just for supporting mental health. This is Mental Health Month, by the way. And I hope, you do what you can to get a book and learn more. I will be coming back next week on trauma, which might sound like a heavy topic, but it's an important topic to talk about, and I'll try to empower you. I always try to have you leave with something empowering, but it's important to talk about. And then the last one is I'm going to be talking about how connection with a parent or teacher affects the brain in the last week, called attachment. So I hope you'll make the next 2 Thursdays. And again, thank you for showing up tonight.
Mr. McSheehy, thank you so much again for a very informative and meaningful session. And thank you to all the parents and educators also who were able to join us as well. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Take care, everybody.